So welcome everybody to the brand new Microsoft 365 UK user group. Really appreciate giving up your time today and being here with us. And so for many of you, especially the folks in the UK, as you know, we do have a few user groups, and obviously they are virtual. And so this is obviously by all means not putting anybody out, but it's just about giving a choice to everybody to have access to more content with the ever-changing Microsoft 365 landscape. So once again, thanks for joining here. And so we have quite a few events planned. We have Joel Oleson from the US, Ryan Schouten, Galen, who were recently part of the biggest Microsoft 365 virtual event hosting on Microsoft Teams. So they'll be talking to us about Microsoft Teams live events case study. And then we will have a short break depending on how we do with the timing. So, we'll look at that at around 5. And then after that, we have Chris Hoard with us presenting his session on the most productive teams are empowered. So I'd like to thank the speakers for giving up their time and also helping me out to kick off this first event. And so with that, I'll kind of just hand over with them shortly. But a bit about myself, I'm Chirag. I live and work in London. I've been working with IT for many years now, and generally all things Microsoft 365 is what I do. And I speak at a lot of community events, mainly in UK and Europe, and really just kind of go about learning my way through the Microsoft 365 tech. So I think with that, Joe, if you're good to go, then I'd like to hand it over to you guys. Take it away.
Thanks. I'm just pulling up the deck real quick. So really what we want to accomplish with this session is tell you a little bit about what we did, but absolutely we want to make sure that you as well understand that this is something you can do either in your company or even running an event for your community and beyond. What I want to cover today, and with me, I'm going to actually point out a few people. So we have Ryan Schouten and Galen Keene on. I'll introduce myself and then we'll dive into the agenda. So let me say first, I'm Joel Oleson. I've been working in the Microsoft 365 space, if we can call it that now, for about 20 years. It'll be 20 years in December. I know that really ages me, but been working with SharePoint and Teams since the early beta, since before it was called Teams, and since SharePoint before it was called SharePoint. So good times. And let me have Ryan introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Ryan Schouten. Haven't been working with SharePoint quite as long as Joel. Been a few years, started in 2006 working with SharePoint. And one thing I like to tell people is one of those things I was forced into SharePoint, but kicking and screaming, but I've loved it ever since. So it's been good times, a lot of good experiences, and I love working with the SharePoint community. And now the Microsoft 365 community.
And Galen.
Hello, everyone. My name is Galen Keene. I am my title is Collaboration Architect. I work as a consultant for a company that I also help manage named Butterfly Technologies. I'm deeply involved in the community, look to help out as much as I can, both in events like the virtual marathon, but also in regional events. I'm the president of the San Diego SharePoint user group, or I'm sorry, Microsoft 365 user group. And again, like to be involved as much as possible and pay forward to those that need some help and guidance as others have done for me.
Awesome. I don't want to forget to fail to mention I'm a director at Proficient. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a Microsoft Regional Director, which just recently got renewed, which is exciting and fun. And one thing I also wanted to mention was the UK. I love the UK. My ancestors actually came from the UK, both from England as well as from the Isle of Jersey, which you may know off the coast in between France and Germany. I've actually been to the UK a number of times, and most recently, in fact, there was a number of years there where I was actually going and speaking at an event that Steve Smith was doing at in downtown London. Maybe some of you may remember those times, but I think I spoke at that event at least 3 times. The best practices event. That was a lot of fun. Can't wait to get back, actually. So the agenda today, we're going to talk about, we're going to kind of mix up Teams live events, but talking about it in the context of this Microsoft Virtual Marathon that we did, where essentially this was a vision that we had for an event that we want to do for the community. And we'll give you a little background on that. In the picture on the right, you'll see Ryan, starting top left and kind of working down to the bottom. We have Ryan Schouten. Jackie is from SPC and Lyman from SPC. So basically the SharePoint conference folks, we ended up partnering with them on this event. They handled the sponsorships and some of the marketing. And along the bottom, we have Galen, Jeff Willinger, who's an MVP who in Southern California as well, and myself. And a little bit about how this event came to be. Even we actually were working on a SharePoint Saturday event, or not SharePoint, but it was really a Microsoft 365 event here in Orange County. And with all of the COVID stuff happening, we could kind of see the writing on the wall. And at first we put it on hold, but we were pretty sure we were going to need to either postpone it or change it. And one of our committee members suggested we cancel the event. And having worked on another virtual event, one that was physical that turned virtual, I was like, hey, let's actually look at doing this virtual. Maybe we should do it on Teams. And Ryan, Galen, and Jeff and I all jumped online that day, and we worked to make this virtual. So hey, I want to kind of share this event. Yeah, go ahead.
Housekeeping thing, can you minimize the Teams panel on the bottom right?
I will do that.
That way we don't just have, if it would update to the correct person, that would be cool, but it just kind of has been showing Galen cool. Sitting there.
Yeah, yeah. So essentially, on the left-hand corner, you have kind of the executive producer crew, I would call it, and then working our way around, we have Jana, who covered EMEA, Europe, Middle East, Africa. She was kind of our representative from Europe, from an executive production perspective. And we have I from Japan and Dipti from India. And essentially, as we were organizing this, we really wanted to be thinking global from the beginning. I don't know if the audio is coming through anyway.
It's not.
Yeah, I figured. So I forgot to check the box. In fact, that's a good tip for you guys. Whenever you share, even if you don't think you have audio, you probably should check the box to include audio. I didn't think I had any audio. Track leads. So we actually, from the beginning, we decided, you know, it's typical to do English, but we really decided we wanted to really embrace the globe. And I started thinking about how there's really a Latin American community, there's a a Portuguese community across Brazil and Portugal. You've got your French-speaking community, which is a lot of those AOS type events, but as well a lot of communities in French Canada, as well as New Caledonia actually had speakers who speak French. And I've been visited some of the community even in as far as Lebanon in the Middle East. And we even had an attendee from not Algeria. Yeah, we did have some from Algeria, but I'm thinking all the way in the south. Is that not Algiers? Anyway, I need to work on my geography a little bit more. From Southern Africa, a French-speaking country as well, and Ivory Coast. So really, there were attendees from over 115 countries. But I do want to highlight the Japanese. When we approached one of the Japanese MVPs and said, "Hey, we really want to include you in this event," they were like, "Oh, well, we can do our own." And we pushed back a little bit and said, no, we really want this to be an inclusive event. We really want to provide Japanese. And we worked with them. They actually ended up creating a Facebook group and invited a bunch of people to help organize Japanese tracks. So essentially we had a couple of Japanese tracks, a couple of French tracks, a couple of Spanish tracks, and then German, Korean, and Portuguese as well. So really we could provide these 7 languages globally. And it wasn't just from the speakers speaking it. Even in our English sessions, we supported the ability for that to be provided in translation and closed in captions. Now, some of you who have been using Teams may have seen, we're used to the 10,000 attendee limit to a Microsoft Teams live event, but during COVID, they actually increased that up to 20,000. And the other thing was when we were planning the event, we were aware that there was a 15 live meeting concurrency limit that during COVID, we got this message that basically said, hey, you can actually support up to 50 concurrent events, and your maximum event duration used to be 4 hours, and during COVID, they said they would increase it to 16 hours, which was, so both of those things we decided we are actually going to take advantage of these increased limits. So our events, which we'll talk a little bit later, was basically each of our live events, we had them run for 8 hours. So basically we would have 4 of the 8-hour meetings. So it would minimize the amount of churn that we needed to do, reduce the amount of live events that we would need to create, and so on. And we can talk more about that. I would as well, if you're running an event, absolutely leverage this live events assistance. Make sure you get that submitted at least 5 days before your event. But Microsoft absolutely is willing to help. We reached out to support once during our event, but we primarily try to do it ourselves, leveraging producers that we trained. And we'll talk more about production in a minute. Ultimately, how this played out, we opened our call for speakers on April 1st and ended it on May 1st. So we had a whole month to support global speakers from all over. And they absolutely were from all over. We had submissions from 45 different countries. And ultimately, we had 164 MVPs who submitted, 20 plus Microsoft speakers, over 700 total sessions submitted. And as you can see, we had quite the lineup from Microsoft, including Jeff Teeper and Naomi Moneypenny, which included some of the Project Cortex announcements. We had John Levesque from the Power Platform, Caruana from Teams, Bill Bear from the AI and search side, Chris McNulty as well from SharePoint and Project Cortex. So we had a really, really good lineup. We even had the GPM for Yammer who joined us as well. And you can kind of see the distribution there. Really interesting distribution where we had all of the peopled continents represented, but also really good distribution from a speaker perspective as well as a attendee perspective. And when you look at our audience, you can actually see that most of our sessions were actually designed at the business and the administrators, then devs, then power users and end users, executives, and we even had a diversity track. We even had a few panels as well. Now, if you're saying, oh man, I really missed this, how did I not hear about this? No worries. We are actually uploading those 400 plus sessions to YouTube, and we're more than 100 in. What are we at now, Ryan?
150.
150. So we're actually updating our schedule as we go along. On the attendee side, we had over 12,750 registered. In fact, you can kind of see an interesting thing that actually came back from Eventbrite, where our top cities were Bengaluru, Pune, and Chennai, which is really interesting to see how many we actually got from India. And you can actually see our attendee distribution, where most of it was in Americas, but EMEA, Europe, Middle East, Africa, we had a really good showing. In fact, our most popular time, where we were running the most amount of tracks, was right in between the transition between Asia and Europe, which in our time zone would have been 4 a.m. So we were running 22 concurrent sessions at that time. Our attendees were from over 115 different countries. Now, here's where I want to kind of slow down and break a bit, and want Ryan and Galen to talk about this a little bit. Basically, when we talk about running a community event on Microsoft Teams as a platform, we ended up pulling a few things together. Essentially, we used Eventbrite for registration, and we added some additional fields to ensure that we could actually support GDPR from a perspective of making sure that people were opting in around their information or opting out from a sponsor perspective. We were integrating with Sessionize for speakers, and we as well extended the fields that we were looking for from our speakers to include things like time zone, language, their preferred time that they wanted to speak. Some people wanted to speak during work, some people wanted to speak before or after. We used GitHub pages for the actual site, and we'll show you that in a second. In fact, it'd be great if you want to queue that up, Ryan. It'd be great if you want to just demo the site and talk about how you built that. One of the key things in the schedule, we integrated the language so you could actually see a flag on the speaking part of it. So when you go to click in to join the session, you can actually see what languages the sessions were in, given we had nearly 100 non-English speaking sessions. We integrated, we took advantage of the SPS events platform, which is great for being able to outreach. We integrated, that's also integrated with our Sessionize. We used Team Live Events, which we're talking about today. And we use Teams meetings for our vendor booths, some Ask the Experts panels, and it was also our backup. So if we had any failed live sessions, which at one point we did, and those were actually run in Teams meetings. And then for our community zone, we had a combination of Teams meetings, kind of video chat, as well as AltSpace VR. And that AltSpace VR experience, we had over 100 people who joined, and had over 400 sessions amongst the 100 people who joined the community zone. So that was kind of a cool experiment too. You want to show your screen,
Sure.
Ryan?
Sure. Give me one sec.
I will stop sharing mine.
That screen. All right, so yeah, as Joel mentioned, one of the things we did is we did create the site on GitHub pages. Biggest reasons for it was, one, it's free. We're trying to start it out as a community event. We want to make sure it was affordable because we didn't have a whole lot of budget. Then also, it's just the simplicity of getting changes out there. As a GitHub page, essentially, it's just a repo inside GitHub. And so as soon as you check in your changes, it pushes it out to the website and it's off and running. So very simple process for working with. It is extremely responsive. It was able to handle all of our user usage without any sort of delays or slowdowns. We had several people say, yeah, the site just worked. It was fast, it was responsive. So granted, it's all just HTML and JavaScript, but it's a fairly decent site. Like Joel mentioned, we did integrate with Sessionize. So for example, if we take a look at speakers page, you can kind of see down here, got a little pulsing orb saying, hey, loading, and then it goes out and it's pulling in all this content from Sessionize. Sessionize was essentially our master repository for all information about sessions and speakers. So we can see we have all of our different speakers. Also, one of the things we kind of did with this as well is we also did an integration with Power BI. So we have, this is a listing of where all of our speakers came from as far as the different locations and where they're sitting. So you can see we have a fairly disparate splattering of where everybody was coming from. So we had some pretty good representation. Sessions, nothing much there, but if we shift over to our schedule, the sessions is kind of a lot of the same information that we'll get from the schedule. And Joel will kind of look at some of this later, but what he did mention as well is we have our schedule across 2 days and lots of information there, but we did also set it up so that way if you click on the title, you get all the information about that session. And as Joel mentioned, the language it was going to be and whether that session was going to be recorded or not. We did have some speakers that said, hey, due to contractual issues or whatever with other things, I'd prefer not to have the recording of my session posted to YouTube afterwards. So we figured we'd notify users saying this session won't be available after if they have to try and choose between a couple different sessions. And then we also added in a nice big, hard to miss join button. So people, when the event happened, they can hit the button and they're off and running. So like for right now, with this particular session, we've already uploaded this one to YouTube. So I can click on it and it takes you straight over to the recording of that session. And then the thing is, like we noticed is even when we had the issues, as Joel mentioned, we defaulted to live events for all of our meetings or all the sessions and all the rooms. But there was a time frame where there was a Teams outage on the first day where we kind of had to shift. But anytime we had to change things up, because Sessionize was the source for session information, we just updated it there and we could repoint the join button without having to go through a whole lot of headaches and changes to the website. Just go in, update the information on Sessionize, and we were off and rolling. Anything else you wanted to bring up about this, Joel? You're muted.
Do you want to talk about the flow that you built? I think that's pretty incredible, kind of behind the scenes.
I could talk about it, because one of the things we ended up doing is, and I can talk about this as well, for our live events, we ended up scheduling them, as Joel mentioned, as long 8-hour blocks, really 7.5 hours, because we had a keynote, 3 sessions, keynote, another 3 sessions. We opted to go that route because, one, we preferred live events, so we'd have nice, clean production. We don't have to worry about somebody's dog barking or an attendee's dog barking or the lawnmower or a siren or any of those sort of things going on and causing problems with the experience for our attendees. And as well, we went with the 8-hour blocks because there's no programmatic way of creating live events. So every one would have had to been created by hand. So instead of having to create 415 individual live events, we cut it down to about 80 events that we had to create manually instead of the full 415. So that helped with that. But as part of that, the problem was we added the speakers, and the speakers got an invite for the full 8-hour block, which confused some people because like, hey, wait a minute, I can't do my session at 4 in the morning. And we had to tell them, no, that's just the block for the room that you're in. So what we ended up doing is setting up a flow. I was initially thinking, hey, let's just do this in PowerShell, but just through time constraints, like I can't, we don't have time for this. So ended up converting the flow over to, well, creating a flow that ingested the session data, which had the short links in it, and in flow created an event for every single session, just as a calendar event, which had the link for the speaker to be able to join into. So that way everybody got an invite with just their session, didn't have to worry about it. So it fairly simple, but it worked, other than it only picked up about the first 256 sessions in the first run, and then picked up had to run it again to pick up the second half.
So while we're showing screens, there's a couple of screens I want to show you. One is an incredible Power BI built by one of the speakers, who basically hooked it up to Sessionize, unbeknownst to us. Very, very incredible what you can do with session data without even authorizing it. This is basically an incredible Power BI chart of all of the sessions. And you can see you've got some filtering going on up here while it's loading.
Hey, Joel, panel showing again.
Yes, let me get rid of that. Thanks. So we've got basically the 7 languages we support. And so basically you could choose one of the languages and filter it. And as well, we've got kind of intermediate, advanced, introductory. So people who are looking to figure out what level they want. We've got all the tracks across the audiences, essentially, the rooms. And since I chose Spanish, it's automatically filtering that. But being able to search across all titles. So as an example, let's just say you were an Azure person. You could search across all sessions. And given this is Microsoft 365, we had all sorts of interesting sessions, including Azure DevOps, some stuff on C# with serverless workflows in Azure, with a nice little pop-up here where you can see the speaker and session details as well. So really, really incredible Power BI chart. And then as well, if you're looking at a specific time, wondering what's running, you could actually filter it based on time of day as well. So pretty cool, pretty amazing stuff. As well, calendar view as well, which I won't dive into, but I had no idea you could do this much, this much with a Power BI chart. What kind of dashboard is this? Incredible, amazing. One other thing I was going to show you was our use of Microsoft Forms. So we had our raffle and the virtual, there was event feedback and speaker feedback. So as an example, here's our speaker feedback form. How would you rate the speaker and session and so on? And if you look at the responses here, you can actually see our speakers did really well. 5 stars across the board. Really, really cool. And we even get, if I want to export this in Excel and read the responses, I can see how long it took them to respond. And Really cool stuff. And the event feedback, I used one of the new templates for forms. And I extended it slightly, but you can see when I go to the responses on the event itself, you can see kind of a slick pie chart. People were extremely satisfied with the event, which is great news. I can as well dive in and find out who's that one person who was not satisfied. Oh, they thought the technical issue that happened was our fault. It was not our fault, so no worries. And as well, a nice overview of the different things. How was the Teams Live platform? People were fairly extremely satisfied with the platform. The community zone was good, and so on. The vendor booths, yeah, could use some improvement, I understand. But from a very dissatisfied perspective, yeah, I think we did pretty well. Most people were extremely satisfied or very satisfied with the event, but then I can dive into my feedback, and I even have a net promoter score of 67, which if you look up the net promoter score, that's some serious loyalty. So pretty happy with my net promoter score, which gives us a nice, very easy way to understand if people would recommend this to a friend. And the answer is, yeah, 42 out of the responses we got were that type. And as well, I can dive into my feedback. Pretty cool stuff. Forms is nice. Very easy. Like, I think it took no time at all to create those forms. Now, this is where things get kind of interesting. When you talk about roles for running a live event, essentially you've got an organizer, you've got a producer, you've got the speaker or presenter, and then you got attendees. For our event, we extended that a little bit, where we had the organizer who kind of set up the live events, but we created this in-between role of executive producer. And these executive producers essentially was Ryan, Galen, and I. And we were kind of set with making sure all rooms were going well from a technical perspective, from a producer perspective, a speaker perspective, basically anything that could be happening. We wanted to have our eyes and ears across all of those sessions. And we'll talk about kind of size and scale in a second. But as well, with all these different foreign languages, we wanted as well some ownership. So we had these track owners who were essentially responsible for the foreign language tracks. We also had producers. We had producer training. We had speakers. We had speaker training. And I absolutely want Galen to talk about what it's like for producers and what was involved in the producer training. And if you want to, you can even queue up that producer deck that are those producer slides. But while you're doing that, I'm going to talk about kind of the how this actually really looked. So in a room, you had the three of us, Galen, Ryan, and I. We were kind of looking across all of this different sessions happening simultaneously. We had producers in most of the rooms, and in some of the rooms, Galen actually had a virtual, almost like a bot, but basically these were VMs that were basically sitting in on rooms to keep them open. There was an issue we discovered during our first block of rooms where after our second keynote, we noticed rooms were shutting down without us telling them to shut down. And we found that you need at least a producer or a speaker to stay in the room to be able to keep it open. And we mentioned we were running these for 8 hours, so it was important that they stay open. You ready, Galen?
One sec, Joel.
Yeah, okay. I'll keep talking to this. So we had 14 simultaneous English sessions going on, plus all these foreign language tracks. And I have a couple of visuals here to kind of show you what this looked like. There's kind of us executive producers, including Dipti in India, Jana in Europe, plus us three, we were kind of, if you look at the pie chart, 68% of sessions were produced by our trained producers, and then there was the 32% that we were covering that we didn't have assigned producers on. But what's incredible is we actually had 5 producers for this event who covered at a minimum of 9 sessions. So over 11 hours. So you talk about this being a marathon. We had some producers who really went beyond the call of duty as well to produce sessions. And you can share anytime you want, Galen. I'll just keep talking. The other thing that I'd mention as well was that production experience was quite interesting. I think we all learned a ton. You know, I've been involved in events like in an individual session before, running them on live events, but trying to run 20 simultaneously and trying to coordinate with 50+ producers across 300+ speakers, it was quite the task. Over to you, Galen.
All right, so what I have on screen now is a deck that we created for each of our producers. And you'll see here that it says presentation slide deck for mile number 1. As Joel was describing, at our widest point, we had 22 concurrent live events happening. What we did from a naming convention was name those tracks with mile markers. So in particular for the English tracks, there was 14 different mile markers. So throughout the course of the conference, you know, there were sessions running in each of the mile markers, and our producers would come in and produce at a minimum a 3-hour block. If you recall from the description, the live event was scheduled to run for 8 hours, and it was broken up by a keynote followed by 3 hours worth of sessions, another keynote, and then another 3 hours worth of sessions. So our producers came in and would produce at a minimum 3-hour block, and we provided to them a slide deck that had some of the, you know, some of the conference information, such as, you know, the SBC sponsorship information, our other sponsors, data, as well as the charities that we were raising money for and asking people to donate to. So thank you for those that donated to the charities. That was really great. We had raffle data, raffle information. Again, the raffle was leveraged forms on the back end for submittals, but also we wanted our producers to introduce their own personality. So we wanted to include a slide where they could include a picture of themselves, talk about themselves. There's definitely some interaction that occurs between a producer and a speaker, as you likely heard before this session started. Additionally, there's some interaction that can occur between attendees and a producer. So we wanted to really personalize these sessions and bring to bear the personality of the producer.
Hey, Galen,
so
can I add?
Yep.
Just like along the lines of that personality, we had varied personalities come through on that. We had some that didn't want to, or just didn't kind of relay who they were. They just kind of wanted to be behind the curtains, just the person pushing the buttons, didn't want the visibility. And we had ones that were essentially running a whole DJ where they're playing music and doing full elaborate intros and everything in between. And so it was kind of interesting as we're going through and processing all these videos, just seeing the different personalities come out, even because you have your speaker personalities and what they were accomplishing, but then you also have the producers and their personalities and the things that they were able to add to kind of help make this event the success that it was.
Yeah, spot on, Ryan. I think, you know, to add a little bit to that, we wanted to provide a foundation for our producers to be successful. So we introduced this deck, and you know, we tried to think of even unplanned scenarios, right? Where let's say something happens, how can we how can we enable our producers to communicate with the attendees what's happening? And we created a couple of slides here to facilitate that message, to extend that message to our attendees. So, hey, we just need a little more time. We're coming right back. Or, this session's been canceled. Please go find another session. Those kind of messages. And a quick shout out to Jana for making these slides so beautiful and professional. But back to what Ryan was saying, definitely producers were able to bring a certain amount of production quality. We wanted to provide a foundation, a framework to make them successful. And for some producers, they went above and beyond and really had their own mini production running within the event, which is very, very cool. And speaking to the training, we did want to train all of our producers, and so we came up with a guide that we leveraged during training sessions that occurred obviously before the event. And in the guide, we attempted to account for everything that a producer may encounter during the event. And we did that by stating, by a per minute basis, what might occur during the 3-hour block. So how to handle, new speakers coming in and transitioning from the first session to the next session, these kind of transitions and handoffs, passing the baton, so to speak, how you might handle that. And so this guide we leveraged, like I said, during training and provided to all of our producers as an asset for reference while they are producing their sessions. Anything else you'd like to cover, Joel?
Yeah, while you're there, why don't you mention the attendee guide that you built?
Sure. So in addition to a producer guide, as you see here, we also had an attendee guide that we created to help attendees navigate through the conference. So really assisting them with understanding the conference website, what each of the headings, what they could expect to see in each of the headings, and how to navigate through that, and importantly, what to do if there was an issue. So, if who they could contact, things of that nature. So remember that, we have these live events happening and speakers delivering content. We also have producers that are producing all of the live events that are currently happening. In addition to that, we had communication channels set up for our attendees to provide feedback or issue and make us aware of any issues that they're experiencing, as well as meetings running within teams that our speakers and producers could leverage to communicate with us any issues that they might be experiencing. So from the executive producer role, we're kind of sitting on top of all of these different things and trying to monitor them to understand where our time was needed and where our efforts were best served to continue to deliver a successful conference to our attendees.
So how we did, we had, like I mentioned, the nearly 13,000 attendees, but that isn't the full story. Essentially, one of the statistics we get out of Microsoft Teams is that little bar chart right below the table, where you can see we actually had 31,701 views, and you can see we ran the event over the course, at least in the Americas, over the course of a couple days. And you can actually see that 31,000 number. Well, what does that actually mean, total views? Well, essentially, if you join a session, you join a live meeting, that counts as one. The next session, if you disconnect and reconnect, so if you stay in that track, you can watch a few sessions in a row, like probably 3 sessions in a row, which would be very likely the case in our foreign language tracks. But if you jump tracks, you leave an event, go to another event, you count as another view. So for every time you join, you count as a view. So this does tell us that most of our attendees probably saw at least 3 sessions. And from the foreign language perspective, which was probably about a quarter of our sessions, we probably had even more. So that number is somewhat underrepresented from a session perspective, but does tell us people didn't just join one session or just go to one keynote. We had quite a few experiences that people had. On the right, on the top, this speaks to the website that Ryan was showing earlier. We've actually had 40,000 views of the website and across 70,000 sessions. So that's fantastic that it's the long tail. You can see the little peak, but we can continue to get usage on the site, and especially with the work we're doing with the videos, you'd be amazed with how many people are saying, when's my video going to go up? When's my video going to go up? We're still getting a lot of requests for the videos and a lot of energy around the event, even post-production. On the bottom, you can see a tie graph view of the tweet stream. So like from looking at Twitter, and you can see for the hashtag we had at the event, we had over 2,000 tweets. And from a sentiment perspective, in the bottom left corner, you can see ours was at a 0.83. Basically, that 0.74 is actually the average across all of the events that Tygraph has been managing. And they said that 0.83 is the highest they've ever seen, which definitely makes us very happy. Some more kind of on the back end of Teams. After you've run a Teams live event, you'll see a report that you can kind of get this little graph that shows you. There's some attendance reports. They'll show you the joins and leaves with specific names on them. They're a little bit dry. They're almost like a log file, but you can get some additional data about how long people were there in the session. On the right, I wanted to just kind of give you a quick view of the first session of every track. So this is not all blocks added up total. That's the number at the very bottom. The 31,701 is the added up all total. But you can see during the first block of each of those miles, so you get 1.1 had 12,000 or 1,235 connected to it as an example. But you can see even in these foreign language tracks, as an example, France or the French track, which was a very long track. It spanned from the Middle East all the way to Tahiti and New Caledonia. So it probably went for, I don't have the exact numbers, but I bet it went for probably 18 to 20 hours. And the Japanese was the one that surprised us the most. We were really, really pleased with the overall experience in the Japanese tracks, which I absolutely would say those ran the most smooth. They from a production perspective, they really didn't need any help. They did a fantastic job, and they had 2 different tracks going simultaneously in Japanese, as well as did Spanish and so on. So what is this? I wanted to kind of build out a couple visuals. So when you talk about an 8-hour block, this green-ish type thing where you can see each of these individual sessions, and so it'd start with a keynote, then you'd have 3 sessions, then you'd have another keynote, then you'd have 3 sessions. That would be the end of a block. And so basically you had each of these blocks going on simultaneously. And even this, it continues on even further. So you can see we have kind of the 8-hour block, then another 8-hour block. So Americas, then APAC, then EMEA, and then it would be Americas again. So basically starting over, where our widest, where we had about 22 concurrent going on. And I think there's even a visual here the schedule. This is zoomed out as far as I could go in the browser. You can see what May 27th looked like. So basically we've got the English fairly filled out in that, where the Asian and European languages haven't necessarily fully come online. But then when we go to day 2, when you've got both Asia in this time frame, you can actually see this was our prime hour, where 4 a.m. our time zone, we've got pretty much every single language had a session during that time, which is really, really interesting. So Portuguese had come online fully. You've got 2 in Japanese, 1 in Korean, a couple French ones, German, and Japanese dev, and the other track. So pretty incredible to try and put on such a production. So you'd say, well, what's the difference between Teams live events and Teams meetings? Teams meetings are good for small, medium group conversations, and you could say that that has just recently increased. I think we're at 300 now. I don't know if that's fully rolled out across all tenants, but basically the Teams team has been increasing that number. We did have one session that was a live event that got rolled over to a Teams meeting, and we had over 200 attendees. Let me tell you, that chat stream was going nuts because of people who had barking dogs, and there was somebody who was talking to somebody else and didn't put it on mute. Those things can be kind of difficult to track down, but there is some ability to mute people. You kind of reach through and mute them, but you can't unmute them. So that makes it a little bit challenging if the attendee doesn't realize that they are on mute and they're trying to talk. The other thing from a recording perspective, these ones you actually have to click record, and you can't be a guest and click record. You actually have to be in the tenant to record it. So a lot of our panels, as an example, didn't get recorded, which is unfortunate. Our Teams live events automatically get recorded. They're automatically large scale, kind of webinar style. Great for thousands of participants. Of note, the browser and mobile app work for attendees, but the mobile app with attendees on live events, you do need to be authenticated. That's one of the weirdness things. But it can be with your own tenant, as an example. But these are absolutely designed for kind of the one-to-many. You can host these in Teams, Stream, or Yammer in the enterprise. These other styles, the Stream and Yammer ones, are designed for internal authenticated traffic. And some of the other interesting things about live events is the scale, being able to scale up to 20,000, and I'm sure that's just the beginning. The AI types of features like facial recognition, speaker recognition, the in-video search. So a lot of that, especially with the Stream integration. Closed captions actually was a fantastic thing for being able to support. We had some accessibility needs where we knew there was going to be some attendees who were deaf, and so the closed captions really came in handy for the deaf folks who are on. What is it like to produce? Some of the key features, you end up with a little console like this where you can see all the other presenters, organizers, producers here. And when somebody has shared their desktop, you will see it here, and you can toggle it here where you can actually add their video to the side by choosing this option. And when you're ready, you click Send Live. You may have to click Start if the event has not started. But this little red button, this End button, has been the bane of my existence. we talked about how we were running these things as 8-hour-long blocks. If any of these people down here who all have rights click this button, it's game over. The session is done and you cannot restart it. So you have to be really careful about anybody that you're bringing into your event as a presenter or organizer, producer. Obviously, it's the organizer who's organizing it, but they absolutely need to be careful and make sure they tell everyone not to click end. The other thing up here, you notice it's live. It'll say pre-live if you're pre-live, and once you are live, it says live. Note there's an attendee number up here where it says 3 attendees. That number sometimes lies, and let me tell you, the attendee reports are the best way to determine how many people attended your session or was at the live event. But this is an interesting indicator of, you know, it's not, I can't tell you exactly what percentage, how close it is, but essentially with authenticated traffic, it's much more accurate. With unauthenticated traffic, it's not as accurate, but it at least tells you there are people connected. You can then later go in and look at your reports. I don't know if there's anything you guys wanted to add on to what it's like producing in teams.
I think maybe a couple tips and tricks here is a couple of really important things to note. In this case, the content stream is what's being presented live in the screenshot that Joel has in the slide there. And just one important thing is that there is no way to queue up on the left-hand side a different content stream. And by that, what I mean is if one of the other presenters that you see a video feed from in that screenshot wanted to share their desktop or an application, as soon as they go to share that, it's automatically going to be presented to the attendees. It automatically becomes live. So that's one of the tips that I think you need to be aware of so that you can manage as a producer what gets shared and when. You can queue up video streams, but queuing up content streams is it requires a little more finesse and planning in your run of show.
Yeah, absolutely. There are other integrations you can do with, say, multiple cameras or multiple streams, but essentially this template of let me show my screen plus a video on the side. You can pick and choose which videos show, but if you use OBS or something like that, you can do more sophisticated things. But from a Teams Live perspective, it's either showing, you know, the content or a combination of the content with the video on the side. And you can again pick and choose which video that is on the side. So I know we're running short on time. One of the things, another thing to kind of be aware of is if you haven't clicked start, and you may have experienced this today, it'll say the live event hasn't started. So, and it's this kind of ugly text. My preference is to get the event started so that attendees will know that it is there, and just put up a slide or put up something so that they have kind of something more welcoming. It's a little bit jarring to join and then see this screen. People are going to just cancel it or close it. They're not going to feel comfortable just sitting here with this screen. We learned a few lessons in our experience. I don't think there's a lot of time to dig into all of these things. We talked a little bit about the end being very final, the pre-live experience we just chatted about. Staging for speaker number 2 can be a little bit challenging. Just make sure you understand that all the audio is actually something the attendees can hear. So, and we talked about staging the content. It absolutely, as soon as you click share screen, it'll say, hey, do you want to boot the other person's stuff? Because it absolutely will kick it off. the other thing is we talked about attendee info. Chat is actually only something that happens amongst the speakers and producers and organizers, or organizer. We've got attendee reports and recordings, which are available to the producers and people who are on Teams admin. Yeah, and as well, one of the things that I did as a producer, I was actually watching the streams. So when you got inside of the Teams experience, even if I'm not even in all those meetings, I can actually see the chats from all those meetings in my activities or in the chat stream. So I can actually go into chat and see what are people saying. In fact, often what I would say is, hey, speaker, if you have any problem, or producer, just mention me, call me out, and that way I would see it show up in the chat. So that was helpful, leveraging chat for escalations. And I think I'm going to end it at this point. Is there? I want to open it up for questions. Any questions for any of us?
Hey, thanks, Joel. Just looking through the Q&A panel, and just gives a couple of minutes for attendees to post their questions. But I think brilliant session, though. Loved it. Just had no idea with all the numbers and the effort that's gone into this. And you know, I was kind of obviously part of the event, you know, with delivering 2 sessions. So that was something to see from that end. But yeah, it's a brilliant session.
Thank you. Yeah, we had an incredible time. If people are wondering, are we going to do it again? The answer is absolutely yes, we are. Next time, we're going to have even more languages. We're going to have more attendees, more speakers. So if you thought that was big, we're going to go bigger, even bigger next time.
Pretty good. Like it. Okay, I think
I see a question.
Okay, go for it.
Do you need any additional software when running a Teams event in order to support multiple speaker video feeds? So the answer is you could have one big one and one tiny one if you made the main feed a video. But if you're trying to, I kind of came up with an idea once where you could do kind of remote desktop into a machine that has Teams on it. So the answer is yes, you would need additional software, but you could run OBS, you could run NDI, or you could run some things, you know, to basically create that additional video experience. Like if you wanted to do Teams in a team, you could do a Teams meeting and then basically get into that Teams meeting. You couldn't do it on the same client. You would need to, like, say, remote desktop into a machine or another client that has Teams meetings running on it for your panel, as an example. And on Stream, yeah, somebody was asking about Stream. So there is that encoder, and I don't know if you want to talk about that, Ryan. The Stream aspect of doing live events on Stream.
Yeah, if you're doing a live event on Stream or in Yam or whatever, you have an option to do an external coder, which you could do OBS, there's Wirecast, there's XSplit, Broadcast. There's a bunch of different applications that essentially anything you would use for streaming, like live streaming content, you can use. In that point in time, whatever you can show, you can stream out. So it's a lot simpler in that way because you can do more things, but it does require extra software and extra knowledge, whereas a regular Teams live event can be open to anonymous users, plus also gives you the simplicity of just sharing out the content, because you don't have to worry about all the extra tools. It's everybody that's there. They have only software they need is the Teams application. Now, if you want, like you said, more video being displayed, then you kind of have to be creative, and it requires some different pieces to play together.
Yeah. So I just showed my screen. You can see the different technologies here. So you can organize across Stream, Yammer, or Teams. We were leveraging in our event, we were leveraging primarily just Teams with presenters, but absolutely you could do any number of these third-party tools, including OBS, to be able to do more of a production with RTMP, with the Go Live experience, producing it across any of these platforms. And then on an enterprise, if you've got, say, a ton of desktops, you're going to want to leverage, say, a CDN or content delivery network type of experience. There's a number of things, like I know that Microsoft uses Hive internally, but you can use third-party CDNs for network delivery, for performance, and so on, for delivering internal to your users on an enterprise perspective, as well leveraging media services as an example for Azure. Ours was very simplified when you look at this, where we were basically producing it over Teams. It was just consumed over the internet on a client, which that client could be the browser or the Teams client for the most part. But you can absolutely make this much more complicated from a production perspective, especially for your town halls and things like that.
Okay, that's great, Joel. I think we'll have to kind of wrap it up there. Would love to hear more and more, but I think just got to watch a bit of a time. But no, listen, I'd just like to say a big thanks to each and every one of you. So Joel, Ryan, Galen, thanks for being here. And yeah, I think hope to see you guys in the future somewhere in once we are all back out on the road. And yeah, thanks for being here, and really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for
hosting.
hosting.
Send us a link to the recording. This is awesome. And hey, Chris, thanks for your support and good luck.
That's no worries, guys. I just want to call you out. I mean, that was one of the best events that I've done this year. And I mean, we organised Teams Fest, which is about 50 speakers, and the scale that you guys managed to achieve, especially across the complexity of language and staging for all of the speakers. I think everyone in the community has got to give you guys a hand for that one. And to be fair, the feedback was awesome amongst everyone, how smooth it went in terms of, I had a couple of brilliant producers with mine. It was just fantastic, guys. And yeah, I mean, I'll be applying next year too. So that it's good to get a heads up on that.
Awesome. We'd love to have you. Thanks for the feedback. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Great, excellent. Okay, all right. So we'll take a quick break. So here's just whilst we have a couple of minutes, maybe grab a glass of water or coffee. Or okay, so we're back now. So yeah, I think I'd just like to say big welcome to Chris Hood for being here with us and kind of helping out to kick off the event. So Chris, really looking forward to your session on the empowering the teamwork. So yeah, take it away.
Thank you ever so much for having me today at this session. My name is Chris Hoard. I'm a consultant from Fusion here in the UK. I speak regularly at events. I spoke for the guys, as you heard, at Microsoft 365 Virtual Marathon. And this is actually one of the sessions that I did there. It's a subject that I'm very passionate on, which is bringing Microsoft Teams and the Power Platform together. And hence, we've called it today, The Most Productive Teams Are Empowered. So what to expect from today's session over the next kind of 45 minutes, we are going to look at the value of using Microsoft Teams and the Power Platform together. We are going to look at some very basic scenarios of which can get you on the way, getting you kick-started. And also as well, we're going to have some calls to action on that. It's very important that, and it's a personal opinion, but that sessions should give you new ideas or really give you the opportunity to take the next step and get hands-on. This is an introductory and insight session, so we're not going to go too far into the weeds from a technical perspective. It is very much, talking about the value, showing it, and then you going away and then getting hands-on. So starting the session today is to define this term empowerment. What is it we mean by empower? Now, empower is to give somebody the power or authority to do something. We can empower individuals, we can empower businesses, and we can empower teams. We empower individuals by things like allowing them to make frontline decisions or giving them the autonomy to be able to make those decisions. In terms of businesses, governments can empower businesses through laws or through policies, and organizations can empower teams through providing them, I guess, with training in order to build their skills or knowledge, or providing them with the tools in order to be able to do their best work. Now, when we come to think about empowerment, okay, it's in Microsoft's mission statement. This might be something that we've heard from attending events such as Inspire or Microsoft Ignite. You may have heard this: to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. That's something, again, we've heard this mission statement in the context of Microsoft, but it's very important that the mission statement is only Microsoft's strategic approach to reaching its corporate vision, reaching its end goal. And if we look into what that corporate vision is to help people and businesses throughout the world realize their full potential. So what Microsoft's mission and vision is that they are empowering people through their tools and their applications in order to help businesses and people realize their full potential. And I like this as an analogy for teams and the Power Platform. Through the Power Platform, we can help teams reach its full potential, and hopefully I'm going to convince you of that by the end of this session. So about Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is the hub for teamwork. I'm pretty sure that you've probably heard of Teams or are using Teams. Teams is where we bring together chat and files and meetings and calling and apps all together. We're bringing together these workloads into a converged application. And in addition to you probably knowing quite well about Teams already, you've probably heard of the story of Teams. So Teams came in it's 3 years old. It came into general availability in March 2017. It came out of Skype for Business Spaces. And in the 3 years up until today, it's won Best in Show at Enterprise Connect twice. In March last year, in 2019, there were over 500,000 organizations who were using Teams. And on the right-hand side, you will see this big figure in July 2019 at Microsoft Inspire. Microsoft announced that there were 13+ million daily active users of Microsoft Teams. So it was the first time that we heard of Teams overpassing Slack, which was considered to be its main competitor back then. So even a year ago, it's been recognized globally as a leader in communication, in collaboration and teamwork. If you didn't know, Teams is Microsoft's fastest growing application in its history, and since overtaking Slack, it's also become a leader in Gartner in terms of unified communication, and a leader in Forrester in terms of enterprise content management. But that 13 million daily active users, getting to that point is only really part of the story. Because a year on, if we think forward to today, then we saw a blog of Teams back in March, and it is growing exponentially. So over 650 organizations of more than 10,000 users use Teams, compared to 150 last year. In terms of supporting 44 languages last year, it now supports 53 languages, and 93 of the Fortune 100 companies now use Teams. And those are amazing statistics, but the ones that are really astronomical are the growth rates. Now, I used that 13 million daily active users in July last year. Well, by November last year, that was at 20 million. In March this year, that was at 44 million. And May this year, so just a month ago, it was at 75 million. It kind of makes you ask, what is the actual size of it now? And during that period, it was 120% increase in 4 months between November and March. I'm interested to see after May's number to see how big that goes. In 7 days during March, there was a growth of 12 million daily active users. And if you look at just one of the workloads and stats concerned with that, 900 million minutes of meeting and calling on average per day. These are absolutely astronomical figures. The use of Teams is literally going through the roof. At Inspire last year, they projected that by July, which is then Microsoft's new fiscal year, they were aiming for 50 million users. Well, it's now over 75 and growing. So what's fueling that growth? Well, firstly, you could say this is due to all the functionality adds in Microsoft Teams over the course of this last year. These are just some of them that I've put down, and I'm not going to drain this whole slide because it would take me an hour simply to go through each of these features. But Microsoft introduced, for example, private channels. Private channels was the biggest user voice of Microsoft Teams at over 25,000 votes. They've introduced the Linux client. They've introduced shared system audio. They've introduced information barriers, which information barriers prevent users within an organization from communicating with each other through Teams. They've added the app catalog. They've added the deployment advisor to work through via Teams and Planner those workloads. But as much as they've given in terms of this last year, it's not just simply about the functionality adds. Other factors that have grown and inflated Microsoft Teams over this past year is that the first is that it resonates Teams when I have conversations with organizations that haven't used Teams up to this point. They're always very receptive. They're always very impressed of what it can do and the benefits of how it can help their businesses. It's also that Teams is at the center of Microsoft's strategy. So a lot of resources and developers within Microsoft are behind Microsoft Teams. They know, they see the reports, they've heard the feedback, they know that this is something that needs to be front and center of Microsoft's strategy. I will talk about COVID-19 in a minute, but since COVID-19 has occurred, there has been a big, massive push towards remote working, and Teams really, along with Windows Virtual Desktop, has been at the center of that. Fourth is in terms of the community. There is a huge Microsoft Teams community. If you were to look on the Microsoft tech community today, there is over 150,000 users or members of the Microsoft Teams community. That's second, I think, only to the general Office 365 community. But the biggest single thing that has fueled that growth, of course, has been COVID-19. If we think about that statistic of jumping from 19 million daily active users in November to 75 million in May, then that has been in line with COVID-19. Now, I don't need to go into COVID-19 and the statistics because they're rather morbid, but the push, towards remote working, the change in every country, in every community, in how we work, Teams has been facilitating that. So where does the Power Platform come in? Well, even before COVID-19, when I started having engagements and many others in the Teams community were engaging with customers around Microsoft Teams, what we tend to find is that organizations don't typically make the most of using Microsoft Teams. So what we mean by that is they may roll out a very basic kind of workload within Teams. So let's say, for example, chat and files. They may use Microsoft Teams when they first start out to chat with users inside the organization. They might use it to co-author files such as Word or Excel or PowerPoint files across departments within their business. But as we step up the workloads, less and less organizations use them. So a lot of organizations today are still not making the most of Teams, even in terms of the out-of-the-box functionality. So whereas most organizations use chat and files, less use meetings, such as audio conferencing, even less use calling. You know, they may not be using phone system, or they may not be using Microsoft Teams devices, or they may not be using direct routing. Less use several or more of the 400 apps that can be added through the Teams App Store, and even less organizations, when taking all of those workloads together, really leverage the full security measures within the Microsoft 365 stack. So I'm talking about other applications such as Intune, cloud app security, data loss prevention, retention policies, communications compliance. We see very few organizations that have what we consider to be a mature rollout of Microsoft Teams. Now, that is all considering the out-of-the-box functionality, but we can go beyond the out-of-the-box functionality within Teams, because Teams does not do everything, and it's not designed to do everything. And it's really about starting to think about going beyond the out-of-the-box experience and workloads, and thinking about how we can customize and enhance Microsoft Teams to fit the needs of our business. So we can do so in one way through things like SPFX or custom designed applications, but we can also think about it in terms of the Power Platform, and that is what we're going to focus on for the rest of the session. So when we start thinking about using the Power Platform and Teams together, it's really all about pivoting the narrative, pivoting the thinking. We hear so much about what Teams can do, but we rarely have conversations in terms of the limits of Teams or what Teams doesn't do. And you've seen that kind of exceptional amount of feature adds that's been added the last year. When we read the blogs within Microsoft Teams, every single month something new seems to be being added to Microsoft Teams. The cadence is astronomical. But we really have to begin thinking about what Teams can't do in order to start thinking about the Power Platform. And I myself am no exception. For the last kind of few years, on the left-hand side, these are the conversations I tend to have around Microsoft Teams, all out of the box. I talk about Teams as the hub for teamwork, bringing together chat and files, meeting and calling and apps. I talk about Teams in terms of collaboration, when I can co-author, or when I can bring together apps within a singular workspace. Or I talk about Teams in terms of security, about bringing that Microsoft 365 security layer down and making it about secure productivity. But when I flip this, and for me, the penny kind of dropped when I was having a conversation with a partner of ours in Ireland. This may be about a year ago. And they were big into using the Power Platform, and they said, well, the way that we think about Teams is really as a platform with which to deploy the applications that we build, because they were very big into the development of their own Power Apps, and that really made sense. And the natural extension of thinking about that is that we can do so much more with the Power Platform to fit our individual business cases. So if we look at the 4 parts of the Power Platform, the first is that Power App scenario. Teams cannot solve all of the business needs within an organization, or even within the departments within that organization. So we can go beyond Teams by building applications to fit what our departments and what our organizations need, such as a scheduling application or an expenses application or a holiday application. Teams does not do these things. Secondly, we can think about it in terms of automation. So it's not just about using Teams, it's about using all the underlying applications such as SharePoint and OneDrive for Business and Exchange Online. But as Teams is a converged application and can bring in other applications such as Forms and Stream, how can we automate what we're doing on a day-to-day basis so that we can free up our team's time and take them away from things that take them a long time within Microsoft Teams. Thirdly, we can look at Power BI and analysis of data. So again, something that Teams doesn't do is the ability to generate reports or do visualizations. However, we can bring those visualizations and reporting into Teams, because it's really, really important that we can use Teams to be able to house those reports and begin to make data-driven decisions, faster decisions, insights. I think in the last session was particularly good, because you could see the use of reporting from Power BI for the event that the guys of the virtual marathon were driving. We can house that in Teams. We can bring that into a Teams and make it the center of our strategies. And fourthly, in terms of Power Virtualization, Power Virtual Agents, these virtual agents are bots which can help in terms of questions and knowledge sharing. How much do we have to go and ask another person a question and they have to give us the same response that they've been giving other people? It takes time to do that. It means that we are taking up their time by asking the question. If we can build bots and put them in Microsoft Teams, then these are really handy for help desk scenarios or knowledge-based scenarios. So using the Power Platform, we can customize, enhance, and solve a lot more of an organization's needs. So the rest of this session is really going to focus on scenarios and examples, because it's important that as part of this session, it's not just kind of talking about and saying, yes, the two can work better together. It's in showing you how they can be used together. So I've kind of devoted this kind of part of the session as to being like a thought experiment. So if you can imagine that I have a team inside my organization and that I ask them feedback on what they'd like to see in Teams and that Teams doesn't do at this time. I've got 6 examples here. Adam says that Teams doesn't have the ability to let us know more about members of the team, and it'll be good to be able to see their bios, because it is important to know a little bit more about team members and who you're working with. Secondly, Amanda has fed back to me that we could really do something that helps us capture the meeting, as people don't always send follow-up emails. So as they're marked in purple, you can see that we've got Power App solutions for both of those scenarios. In terms of Power Automate and using Power Automate, the 2 scenarios are as follows. Vesku said it would be amazing if we could add a welcome message when somebody joins a team, because the current experience isn't good enough. When you get added to Teams, it simply says that somebody's been added to Teams, but it doesn't really say who they are, or it doesn't say, kind of orientate them into the team. On the other hand, Juan has said we need to be kept up to date on the Power Platform, and there are a lot of Twitter posts where they're going out and they're missing that kind of information. It's important that the team sees those Twitter posts, so they'd like to bring them into Microsoft Teams. The last 2 scenarios, which will focus on Power BI. The first, Chris has said we need to get better oversights on Microsoft 365, and he needs to quick reference that information on a day-to-day basis so that he can better plan for the use of workloads. And Yannick is saying he needs to be able to see where people are in their Teams migrations, and he can't easily tell and compare from Excel data. We're going to break these down. So the first solution, which involves Power Apps and goes back to that scenario where Adam is saying that we don't have the ability to know more about the members of the team. This one was solved by building what we call a Canvas app. A Canvas app is almost like a blank page used to be able to create your application. If I just dive into this, is what it looks like. It's very simple. It's 3 screens, and I can insert things such as text and photos. I can embed videos. Very simple to create, and for this purpose, this maybe took about half an hour of my time to be able to create this simple application. Now, what we would do is create and save that Canvas app within Power Apps once we have been able to, build our app. Very simple. After we've set out the screens that we wanted for our app and the functionalities, we would come along and then we would save that Canvas app. What we would then do is that we would download that as a zip file. So as you can see within the Power Apps Admin Center, we click on Add to Teams, and then we would just download that app. You can see that it's downloaded. We then have the zip file that's downloaded, and we then upload that to Teams. So if I come down to the Apps section on the left-hand side, I then have the ability, or if I have permissions to add apps into our environment, I can then upload for either me or my teams or for my organization. And then once done, that application is then ready to be able to either, you can pin this app. So if I go into my team and then I come into the channel apps, I can then pin that application itself into a team. So you can see this app has been built as an app to show my co-workers' bios. I'm going to click a simple button to start. I want to know more about Adam. I click on that button with Adam. So I can read a little bit more about Adam. I can see the organizations that he's worked with. I can even play the video.
I have Adam Delton here with us.
Or I can, for example, embed links out to like Adam's Twitter page. So there we go. I could also do that for LinkedIn, any other sites that he's involved in. And going back simply on that app, I can do that for all the members of my team. So for Adam, for Chris, for Vesku. So I can pin that app in an actual team. I can also use it as a personal app. So if I pin it to the left rail here on the left-hand side, that means that I can use that app independently of any teams and use it as a personal app to myself. And again, if I want to pin that to the left-hand side, I can do, so that it doesn't disappear. There we go. It stays persistent on that left app rail. So with this solution, building this Canvas app for bios can be it's good for team building, it's good for orientation, but it doesn't just have to be for this simple use case of looking at people's biographies. It could also be used for training. You could build an app on an instruction manual, on a technical how-to guides. It could be for product portfolios. Building a Canvas app from scratch, you can develop an app in days, in hours, in fact, that is going to immediately start helping people. So that is a kind of quick solution and a quick get started. And there are lots of guides around on things like YouTube to show you how to get started and build those Canvas apps. The second solution, and this is what was being asked by Amanda, is she wanted something to be able to capture the meeting, as people don't always send follow-up emails. Now, one of the really powerful things about Power Apps is that you don't just have to create one from scratch like I've shown you. There are others in the Power Apps community that build Power Apps and like to share them with other community members. And this is just one here. It's called Meeting Notes version 2. It's one that was built by Reza Durrani. He's very big in the Power Apps community. Now, this is a meeting notes app. As you can see, this is what it looks like. And as you can see, I have a meeting that's currently open. I'm just going to start that. So it's going to say, welcome to my actual meeting. And you can see that it's recording the time. I have the ability to make notes. I have the ability to add tasks. So for example, I want to come along and add a task here. Okay. So my task for Adam, go and add that. It'll ask me, who am I going to assign that to? So I have the ability to add tasks. I have the ability to take notes. You can see all the meeting details in here. You can also draw. It uses a kind of common draw pad. You can take photos. It will ask me. I'm just going to block that. I've got the ability to upload images that I have, upload documents. I even have the ability to be able to have audio files recording. Now that goes, as far as I know, quite far beyond the native ability to capture notes within a Teams meeting. Now, this application, as said, was available from the community, so you can, and I'll post the link through after the session is completed today. All you need to do is get the ms.app file, open or upload that MS app file into Power Apps. So you would actually upload it here. Okay, so you would upload that app into Power Apps. What you would then do is follow the exact same process as before. So once you've opened that Power App, you would save it, you would download the zip file again, upload that to Teams, and again, you can configure it as a personal app on the left app rail or as a tab within a Teams channel. So we've solved that ask by Amanda. We have an app that we can use alongside our Teams meetings, not just in order to be able to take meeting notes, but we can take tasks, we can draw, we can add files to it. And in that application, so if I go back to that application, once that's all done, and if I go back to, to the start in that application, I can then go and send all of that information to everyone within the team. So I just also want to point out that if you're wondering as well where to get started from Power Apps, if I come, to add a new tab and I go to add Power App and I come along, you also, if you add, you can see that Microsoft have provided you with a lot of different apps in order to be able to get started with a lot of different scenarios. So you can see this one, how to set your out of office directly through Microsoft Teams, how to build an app for leave requests within the business, because these are all important scenarios, and most teams and departments within businesses need this functionality, but this functionality isn't natively within Teams. So they're brilliant. I think you can kind of see how far we can extend the functionality of Microsoft Teams with these apps that we can build and that don't appear in the Teams app catalog, and that we ourselves can build at without having to spend to go and buy those apps from another vendor. In terms of getting ready for Power Apps, just some things that you need to know. You need to get your environment ready from Power Apps, and we do this within the Teams Admin Center. So within the Teams Admin Center, if we come up on the into the tab here, and you can see that I have this section here called Manage Apps under Teams Apps. If I click on Org-wide Settings at the top right-hand side, I need to have this on, which is custom apps. If you don't have this on and off, then no users inside your organization will be able to upload or sideload apps into Microsoft Teams. So that's an important setting that we need to understand. In addition, we can govern the use of those apps by app permission policies. Now, app permission policies, you have the global org-wide, and you can just set a one size fits all across the whole organization, but you can also create custom apps policies to assign to your users. So say you wanted specific teams to use those specific Power Apps that you've built, you can define this by permissions policies. And in terms of setup policies, this defines what's on the app rail on the left hand side of Teams. So if you can see this section, okay, so if I go back to Teams, if you can see this section on the left hand side, this app rail, you can actually define it top down, and as you can see there, this is what it looks like if you were to add your Power Apps underneath the default applications. And then you would apply, like the permissions policies, you would apply that setup policies to users. So 3 calls to actions on Power Apps through seeing those 2 examples. Leverage those sample apps. Look around the Power Platform community for those community apps. I've seen some great ones. I saw one the other day for a QR code scanner that you can plug straight into Teams. You know, you can get started very easy. You don't have to build them necessarily from scratch with Canvas apps. You can take what the community is willing to share and really add to your team's environments. Secondly, identify and foster makers. It's important if you are going to get into building low code, no code applications, that you have people that are willing to get hands on and, you know, quite creative people in order to be able to build them. By all means, you don't need professional developers to get started, but if you do have developers inside your organization, then it is also good to get them involved in terms of their knowledge. And the further you get into Power Apps, the more that you will need to leverage their experience to embed advanced functionality. And thirdly, continue in learning. There's lots of courses on MS Learn. There's lots on YouTube. Also as well, Power Platform Fundamentals. You can now be certified and get underway from your certification experience. Now moving on to Power Automate. The 2 scenarios, the first with Vesku, he wants to be able to add a welcome message when somebody joins a team. The current experience isn't good enough. So when new users are being added to teams, it just comes up as a system message saying somebody has been added to a team. This isn't really that helpful because it doesn't provide them with a welcome message. It doesn't welcome them to the team. It doesn't orientate themselves. You could have a team that has 24 or 36 channels. What are you going to say to them are the ones for them to use? You're going to have to then go off and you're going to have to go and train those people and orientate and spend time doing that. What happens if you had a team of 500 people? You have to really think that there must be a better way to do this, and there really is. So what the solution to this is that we add flow into Teams, and we build a flow based upon Teams triggers, and then we add a user to a team. So I'm just going to show you how this is possible to do. So going back into my Teams environment, you can see here I have in flows. And I have flow here, so I've added flow as a tab into the team itself. Now this can take a little bit of a while to load up, so there it is. Now I'm just going to go into this actual flow which was built. As you can see, it's a Teams flow. I'm just going to go and edit that flow now. Very, very simple to do. You start with a Teams trigger when a new team member is added. So when add team, you get their profile from Microsoft 365. You use their user ID, and then once you've got their details, you then use this Teams action called Post a Message V3. It's currently in preview. But it is the one to use. And then what you would do is that you would set your team, you would set the channel to post into, and then you would set what you actually want in your message. So you can see here, hello, display name of the user, welcome to the team, and I'm just advising them what are the most important channels. So I'm saying, look, apps, flows and dashboards, and this is what they're used for. So at least gives them a little bit of insight. Now it can be much more intricate. This is just an example. It also, you know, ask everyone to give them a warm welcome, which is something that we want from all team members to reach out and make them feel part of the team. Now I'm just going to show you how this is executed. So if I go into Teams and I go to add a member, I'm going to add a member. I'm going to add Yannick to the team. I'm going to add. There we go. He's added as a member. So now he's added as a member. I am then going to test my flow in action. So when you've built these flows, you can always use the flow checker to make sure that it's all consistent running through. But then if I click test and I myself perform, because if I just left this, it would probably run 2 or 3 times a day, and so the message will come up a few hours later. But I want this to start straight away, so I'm just going to trigger that now. So this takes a minute or two. You can see now it's going to refresh and it's going to run. So you can see that the flow is running. And there we go. The flow ran successfully. Now if I go into the general, there we go. So you can see that flow has run as expected. So I added Yannick to the team and it then triggered that welcome message. Now we think about how much time that can save me in terms of writing a message, and how much time that can potentially save me in terms to have to orientate new members into the team. It can save us quite a bit of time, and that's really what the value of using Flow with Microsoft Teams, because there's things that we do in Teams that take a long time. Can we make things really quick, really instantaneous for what it is that we're trying to achieve? So that fourth scenario is very much, is quite similar to this. This is where Juan said he has a lot of Twitter posts and he wants to bring them into Teams. Microsoft did have a connector to Twitter, but retired it a few months back, and it basically says like use Power Automate in order to do it, but really doesn't give any more instructions. So in this solution, what we've actually done is we've created again a flow, but we are using adaptive cards, and then we build the team flow based upon a Twitter trigger this time. So not a Teams trigger, but a Twitter trigger and an adaptive card action. And then we await for the post to come through. So again, I'm going to break this down and show you how this is done. So if I go back into my flow here and I go to Twitter posts, so I'm going to just edit that. You can see when a new tweet is posted. Now this is a really simple start, trigger. I am getting from at MS Power Automate. You can do this for multi, so you would add your Twitter account details and then you would say, who do I want to get the tweets from? And that's when you use their Twitter handle. So I'm going to pull in tweets from Power Automate. I can do this with many different Twitter accounts if I want to. It doesn't just have to be single, but in this case, I have just used to pull it from Power Automate. And then you can see I've got a Teams action that follows it called post your own adaptive card to the channel. Okay, and this is what it looks like. Now that looks complicated, right? I mean, that you think, oh, that's probably not something I'm going to know how to write. Well, here's the really cool thing is that if I come down into my flows and then Microsoft have a ready to go adaptive card designer that can be used and then can deliver that payload for you. As you can see down the bottom, there is the payload. Now, what we do with this adaptive card, and I think the site is adaptivecard.io. If you just put in Microsoft Adaptive Card Designer, then it will take you to this site. We select the app that we want to work with. So in our case, Microsoft Teams in light mode. And there you can see what that card is actually going to look like, right? And then what we would do is we would then make the amendments on that as we require. When we have, so for example, I don't want this section here, for example. I would just X that out. I don't need that. You can see it changes what it actually looks like. And the outcome of that, of almost modifying this template, will give us this payload. And we copy and paste this payload and then put it into our flow. And then putting it into our flow, we then use dynamic content. So if the dynamic content, you can see all these actions here to get the information that we want within our adaptive card straight from Twitter. The outcome of that, so if I go back to the general tab, is that this is what it is look like. So this is a tweet, and it has been posted by our flow into our general channel, and it looks pretty close. It's not all the way there at this moment in time, but it looks pretty approximate to that Twitter connector, that old Twitter connector in Microsoft 365. And I can see, you know, the contents of that tweet. If it's something that I want to chase up on, I can then just simply click on view tweet, and it then goes out to the tweet itself within Twitter. If I wanted to view that user, I can do. So the benefits of this is that we've saved time having to check Twitter, and also it captures all posts and I can respond if needed. But we're bringing it into the team, right? So it means that all of the team is saving time checking Twitter. I've been guilty of this. I've spent lots of time. So there's nearly unlimited use cases in terms of approvals, alerts, or meeting reminders. Good to know or have is it's good to know Teams flow templates. It's good to know the Teams triggers and actions. So spend a little bit of time getting hands-on. And if I go back to home, or if I go to the templates here, look at all the templates that already involve Teams. So I'm just going to go Teams. And there you can see there are some already built for you out of the box that you can start using today. In addition, know the applications that you're bringing into Teams. If you're using Stream or Forms, is there associated flows with that? You could have a form which links to the flow, which then when somebody completes a form, then goes into Microsoft Teams. Good to know is how to build a flow. Again, there's lots of stuff online about this, and it's also, and I can't stress the importance of this, it's having a test environment. Don't always use your production environment because there could be some unintended consequences. If you use something like demos.microsoft.com, the CDX platform, or a 30-day kind of disposable trial, spin yourself up a test environment with Microsoft 365 and get hands-on. So the 3 calls to actions in Power Automate is to test and build flows, procure that test environment, perform a time and motion study, what is taking a long time for your team to do, and like Power Apps, continue with MS Learn and Power Platform fundamentals. Now, the final part of this is in terms of the solutions for Power BI. So Chris said he needs better oversights and adoption in Microsoft 365. He needs a quick reference. So this is all about putting a dashboard and report into Microsoft Teams. And this is a really kind of simple process in order to be able to do. So inside our Power BI environment,
Let's go a few minutes.
We're holding to time. Okay, I'll show this one and then we'll bypass to the end.
Go for it.
Brilliant. So in terms of this application, okay, we install the Microsoft 365 usage analytics package. We then come into the admin portal. Okay. So it's just loading up the admin portal. If I then come down here to reports, and then come down to usage scenario, it's just simply a case of enabling the Microsoft 365 usage analytics. Once I have done that, I would then take my tenant ID from Azure AD, and then in Power BI, the workspace would populate, and then if I click on the reports, this is what it would look like. So it's a ready used to make dashboard. Now this dashboard can be easily put within Microsoft Teams. If I go to the dashboard, I then can click on Microsoft Usage Analytics, and it can pipe up all my usage analytics into my team. This is a free app to use. You can get started on Power, BI and Teams integration today. And there are many other kind of applications out there through third parties, or you can start to build them yourself, which was solution 6. Unfortunately, we've not got time for this today, but if I'm sure that I can talk a little bit more in another session at a later date. So the 3 calls to action for Power BI is to get hands-on and build a simple report from an Excel spreadsheet. I will put some instructions on how to do that after the session. Push for a culture of data-driven decisions. It's really important that to get Power BI into teams and start using them together is you have to determine with your teams to say, look, we need to start making decisions strategically based upon data. We want to move away from teams being based upon kind of opinion and an emotional side of things. And thirdly, like all the others, continue learning with MS Learn and the Power Platform fundamentals. We've seen Power Apps, Power Automate and Power BI in isolation, but you can use them and combine them together. This solution that Microsoft has brought out and is free again for customers is the crisis communications application that uses all three together. So it's 2 Power Apps, 3 flows and a Power BI dashboard with all of the data held within SharePoint. Now that could be for a crisis such as COVID-19, or it could be an earthquake, or it could be a drought, or it could be a financial market stock crash. But the more you are involved in Power Apps, or the Power Platform, I should say, the more than you would use the solutions together. So coming back to the end, many organizations aren't using their potential with teams, as well as just simply rolling out the out-of-the-box workloads. You can customize and enhance. It's really easy with the Power Platform. To get the most productive workforce is not simply a case of communicating in collaboration and doing that through teams. It is also acting and making apps based upon business needs. Is having teams that are tailored to your team's needs as a just standard one size fits all out of the box functionality. More productive teams is if we can automate these low level tasks, so we can make things really fast to do within teams and connecting those applications together. And thirdly, it is all about making data driven decisions within business. And if our team can do that through dashboarding and reports, then it is going to make us a lot more productive than we were previously. You've seen the calls to actions. You will get a copy of this slide deck from Chirag. Get hands-on, basically, get started today and learn more. So returning to outcomes, I hope within this very this short session is I'm so passionate about it, I could speak for it for at least half a day on it easy, is the value of using Teams and the Power Platform together. Teams can take us so far, but I think to reach the potential, both in terms of the Teams and the Teams application, we really need to start thinking about using it, the Power Platform. In terms of the scenarios, they're very simple scenarios. They can get much more complex than that. But they are just ideas to get you kick-started down that road to using them together or to find out more. And the calls of action is that I hope after today is giving you some food for thought, and that you think, well, maybe tomorrow I'll try it out in my test environment. So I'd like to thank you ever so much. Chirag knows I can go on quite a bit, so I'm going to stop it here. You can reach out to me through email, or you can through Twitter, LinkedIn. You can go to my site at microsoft365pro.uk. In terms of what I'm doing next, I'm on a Commsverse early next month, and then we have Teams Fest in October. I've got lots of stuff, but as you know, in the speaker world, waiting for people to say yes or no. So hopefully I'll see you over the course of the summer. Thank you, Chirag, for inviting me today, and thank you again to the guys at Virtual Marathon. It was an exceptional experience.
No, thanks to you, Chris, and everyone else. So, really appreciate your help. Yeah, great session. So, I'll just kind of bring the slide off. If everybody posts the feedback, that would be great. And so we have the next event at around 15 July, next month, Wednesday. So you can update the, if you get to the event page, then you'll get more details on that. Great. Okay. Well, thanks, Joel, Galen, Ryan, and Chris for today's first user group session. And with that, a big thanks to all the attendees. And so, yeah, be safe until next time.
Yeah, and good luck with the group. Happy to help spread the word. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care of
Bye.
yourselves.